Peace, y'all. This is Just Curious, where the questions are the compass. I'm Rob Evans. Thanks for being with me today. This week's question seems simple. Might be too simple for some folks. You might have a really quick answer for it, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Do neckties still matter? Are they necessary or just relics from another era? Now you might think, Rob, why are we talking about neckties today? But stay with me, because the question isn't really about fabric. It's about codes. It's about belonging. It's about what we pass down and what we decide to leave behind. So that's what we're doing today in this particular episode. I appreciate you all for coming back. I've appreciated all of the messages that I've received via text message and phone calls. I'm glad to know that what I'm dropping is resonating with some folks, and I'll just ask that you continue to share it with someone that you think might benefit from it as well. So again, the question is, do neckties still matter? Are they necessary or just a thing from another era, from the past? So here's why I'm asking. Other day, Tina told me Khalil needed a tie. He's on the JV football team. I'm so grateful that he's just a kicker and he plays safety sometimes, but he really wanted to be on the team this year, and I did not want him to be on the team, but here we are, and he's the kicker. But he's on the JV football team, and they have this tradition on game day. Everybody wears a tie. Normally their games are on Thursday, but last week school was closed on Wednesday for Yom Kippur, so they moved the game to Saturday, and the tie tradition moved with it. Tina asked Khalil if he had a tie, and he just looked at her and said, well, my father has plenty. And, we both got a kick out of that, and he's right. I do have plenty of ties. I restarted my tie collection. My fraternity a few years back, it's probably more than a few at this point, maybe 10, did a tie drive, and I got rid of 90% of my ties, and I still, at this point in 2025, have tons of ties. About time for another tie drive to get going. Well, anyway, he's right. I do have plenty of ties in my closet. I have a closet full. I've seen ties for graduation, interviews, weddings, funerals, you name it. I think I've had an opportunity to wear a tie. I've worn it when it wasn't necessary and worn it when it was definitely necessary. So I called him into the room and said, I hear you got to wear a tie. So laid out a display of ties for him to choose one. He chose one that he liked, and I was like, so cool, let me teach you how to tie it. And he just looked at me, and without even pausing, he goes, nah, I'll just watch YouTube. And I was like, dude, the audacity, right? Nah, I'm gonna do this. You're not gonna take this experience away from me. So I laughed, but put my foot down and was like, no, son, you're gonna let me show you how to tie this tie. And we did it, because in that moment, I really wanted to take that opportunity. It wasn't just about tying a tie or not in that moment. It was about connection and using those moments when they're there organically to share the culture, share life, share those values that I've been working on. So it's about passing something on. And ultimately, it's also about making sure that he's aware of the code that is in these United States and how he's going to have to move and navigate, and giving him the tools to think critically about what's happening in front of him. But as I was going through that, instantly, I'm back in another house, in another room, actually in another mirror at that point. There's an old picture of me on my Instagram standing next to my oldest son, and I'm doing the same thing, teaching him how to tie a tie. Loop, cross, start, loop, cross, pull, start over, as we were getting dressed for my grandmother's funeral. In that picture, we're both wearing red and black. She loved the color red, so the whole family wore red to honor her. And so this moment that we did this wasn't really about professionalism. It wasn't about fitting in. It was all about respect, about love, about our family showing up for someone who meant everything to us. The nod that day was a ritual, and it was dignity, right? So when Khalil said YouTube, I thought about that picture and how sometimes the tie means much more than just the fabric, because he's looking at it like, let me just tie this thing real quick. And I'm like, hold on, let's back up, because it means a little bit something more than that. But what does it mean, right? That's the ask. What does a tie really signify? Sometimes a tie is respect. It's this moment matters. I'm showing up right. Sometimes a tie is ritual. Again, weddings, funerals, graduation, the tie marks the occasion. But sometimes a tie is respectability, and that's different, right? Respectability is about performance. It says, if I look the part, maybe I'll be safe. Maybe I'll be taken seriously. And there's history here. There's history in this country here. Tema Okun, for those folks that are familiar with Her writes about white supremacy culture, not just the overt racism we think about, but the everyday patterns that shape how organizations and systems operate. Things like perfectionism, urgency, either or thinking, and the idea that there's only one right way to do things. And those patterns show up in our dress codes too, right? In what we call quote unquote professional, and who gets deemed quote unquote credible. For a long time, the tie for me was a part of that assimilation tax that you just have to pay. You pay it with your image before anyone even listens to your ideas. So you just gotta make sure that you know how to navigate this space and do it in a way that's gonna allow you to maintain dignity in self and your own agency. And if you grew up anything like me, especially later in my late teens, early 20s, you know the mantra, every I dotted, every T crossed, never give anyone an excuse. And the tie was a part of that package. So you just put it on. And when I think about it, we do these things sometimes without giving much thought to it other than this is what we do. And if I'm also thinking about it, respectability politics runs deep in our history. I'm immediately transported back to time when I'm teaching either a history class or a leadership class. I'm talking to my students about Rosa Parks. Everyone thinks they know Rosa Parks' story, or at least the sanitized version of it that we get every year, the tired seamstress who didn't want to give up her seat. But we know it was much more nuanced and calculating than that. And so I think about Rosa Parks and Claudette Colvin, a 15-year-old who refused to give up her seat on the bus months before Rosa Parks, but the movement chose effort to choose Rosa Parks over other people who had been in the situation, in part because she fit the idea of quote unquote what respectable image was. Same act of courage, different reception because of that code. It's again, knowing how to navigate and use that code is what I really want to be able to impart on my children. And in this moment, it was Khalil. So yeah, the tie isn't just fabric, it's part of a story that we tell ourselves, a story that this country tells itself about professionalism, about meritocracy, but it's also a story about respect and ritual. As I talked to Tina about this and how we used to apply for jobs, back then it felt like, especially early on in your career, it was all theater. Fonts on the resume, tone of the cover letter, shirt pressed, shoes shine, tie perfectly centered, because I believe professionalism was a part of that package, was a part of a uniform. And in some ways that uniform worked. It cracked doors open, bought us, 5 minutes of grace. But now, here I am, I'm not entry level in my career. I'm a journeyman at this point, and actually, I'm here as an unrestricted free agent right now, and I'm not 22 anymore, so my resume's deeper, my voice is steadier, and my values are clearer. And here's what I know. My credibility doesn't hang on a Windsor knot, right? Not anymore. My work, my words, my care for people, that's the credential. That's what I'm trying to convey to Khalil. Still, I can't just throw ties away. Some rules still demand it. Courtrooms, boardrooms, funerals, high school locker rooms even, it seems. So the question isn't do we wear them or not? The question is why, right? Interrogating that why. So I'm back with Khalil, standing right beside him, standing in front of him. And I realized I wasn't just teaching him the steps, I was teaching him discernment. And that was the goal, to make sure that he was able to think critically and be able to evaluate the situation around him. Because respect is mutual, right? Respectability is performative, it's performance. And that's what I want him to recognize, that one honors the moment, the other hides who you are. So as we looped and pulled that knot, I told him, I'm like, Khalil, this is how you tie it. You use it for weddings, you use it for funerals, you use it for interviews, but your real credential isn't your knot. It's your voice, your work, and your care for people. All right? Wear the tie if you choose to. Don't wear it out of fear. Don't tie yourself smaller just to fit in. Don't shrink to fit in. Because I've worn ties that meant dignity, like for my grandmother's funeral, and I've worn ties that felt like a leash. Like maybe if I looked just right, I'd survive that meeting. And I haven't been in that space in a long time. And I didn't want him to confuse the two. And I think that's really important. So, do neckties still matter? For me, a tie is a tool, not a rule. It can be armor, it can be art, it can be ancestor, it can be respect, but it should never be a leash. And now I'm curious about you. When was the last time you wore a tie? First and foremost, did it mean respect, ritual, or respectability? And again, thinking about the difference between respect and respectability. And did it help you be more yourself or less yourself when you put it on? And maybe it didn't help either way, it's just a thing that you did, but I'm curious to know, did it help you be more or less yourself? Sometimes the smallest questions, I think, can reveal the biggest truths about how we live, how we show up, and what we pass on. So I just want to leave you all with that. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, if you found value in this, please feel free to share with someone else and reach out to me. I'll respond. This is Just Curious. I'm Rob Evans. The questions are the compass. Peace, y'all.